Okay, picture this. A soldier, fully armed, still fighting World War II. Sounds normal, right? But what if I told you he was still fighting it nearly 30 years after the war was officially over? Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible true story about a man who just refused to believe peace had come. Let's get into it. So let's set the scene. The year is 1974. For most of the world, things are, relatively peaceful. Cities are being rebuilt, new music is on the radio, and World War II, that's just a memory in the history books. But not for everyone. I mean, just to put that into perspective for you, we're talking about almost 30 years. 29 years have passed since Japan surrendered. That means an entire generation had been born and grown up in a world that wasn't at war. It's a huge amount of time. But for one lone soldier, hidden away on a remote, jungle-covered island, it might as well still be 1944. He's still fighting. He's fighting an enemy that's long gone, for a cause that ended decades ago. So, how is that even possible? What could possibly lock a man in a time capsule like that for so long? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back, way back. Back to the height of the war and to a single order that would change everything for him. Okay, so you really have to understand the world Hiro Onoda came from. This wasn't the Japan we think of today, with all the high-tech gadgets. This was Imperial Japan, and the mindset was intense. From the time they were kids, the message was drilled into them. You die for the emperor. Surrender? That was the absolute worst thing you could do, the ultimate dishonor. And an order from your commander? That was absolute. It was law. This went way beyond just patriotism. It was a whole psychological framework where your life, your identity, was all about serving the emperor. And Onoda wasn't just your average foot soldier, not by a long shot. He was handpicked for this super elite, top secret place called the Nakano Military School. And there, they didn't just teach you how to shoot a rifle. Oh no, they taught you how to become a ghost. We're talking espionage, sabotage, and the fine art of guerrilla warfare. How to melt into the jungle, cause chaos for the enemy, and just survive. So by 1944, things are looking pretty grim for Japan in the war. They're getting desperate, and that's when they start relying on these specialized guerrilla soldiers. Right before Onoda gets shipped out to the Philippines, his commanding officer, a major named Yoshimi Taniguchi, gives him the command that is going to define the rest of his life. And this is what he said. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but we will come back for you. Until then, you are not to surrender. You are also not permitted to take your own life. I mean, wow. Those weren't just words. For Onoda, that was a sacred promise. And that single order, that promise, that's the key to this whole story. And with that, his mission began. A mission that was supposed to last maybe a few years, but would turn into a decades-long war, fought by one man. So August 1945 rolls around, Japan surrenders. The world celebrates. But deep in the jungle, Onoda and the 3 guys still with him, they hear about it, sure. They see the leaflets dropped from planes saying the war is over. But remember that elite training, it all kicks in. To him, this is just classic enemy propaganda. A trick, right? A clever lie to get them to give up. So they ignore it. And just look at how much time goes by. The war ends in 45, but they keep going. A few years later, in 49, one of them, Private Akatsu, has had enough and surrenders. Now there are 3. Then, in 1954, Corporal Shimada gets killed in a shootout. Now there are 2. And it stays that way for a long, long time, until 1972, when his last companion, Kozuka, is killed by local police. And just like that, after almost 28 years, Onoda is totally alone. But here's a really crucial and tragic part of the story. This wasn't just some guy hiding out in the jungle. His one-man war had real victims. Over those decades, he and his men killed about 30 local Filipinos. See, in his mind, the war was still on. So a farmer in a field, that was an enemy scout. The local police, an enemy patrol. He was just following his orders to disrupt the enemy. And people tried everything to convince him. They dropped newspapers, letters from his family. They even had his own brother record a message begging him to surrender. And they blasted it from loudspeakers into the jungle. And his reaction to all of it? It had to be a trick, an incredibly elaborate enemy plot. So after all these official searches, all these attempts failed, you'd think he'd be there forever. But the person who finally finds him isn't a soldier or a diplomat. Nope, it's a 24-year-old college dropout on a personal quest. This guy's name was Nomio Suzuki, And you have to hear his life goals. He told people he wanted to do 3 things: find a real panda, find the abominable snowman, and find Hiro Onoda. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's such a bizarre, almost funny twist in this incredibly serious story. And get this, the Japanese and Philippine governments had searched for decades and found nothing. Suzuki? He goes into the jungle and finds Onada in just 4 days. 4. He just sort of set up camp, called out Onada's name, and said, "The war is over. The emperor is worried about you." And Suzuki tries to explain everything. How Japan is a totally different country now, a peaceful, wealthy nation. But Onoda is unshakable. He listens, but his response is basically this: "I am a soldier. I have my orders. I will not surrender unless I receive a direct order from my commanding officer to do so." So Suzuki gets it. There's only one way this is going to end. It's not about convincing him. It's about following protocol. And so his crazy adventure sets in motion the final, totally surreal chapter of World War II. Now, the Japanese government had a new mission: find Major Taniguchi. I mean, where is this guy almost 30 years later? After a pretty frantic search, they track him down. And he's not in the army anymore. He's a civilian. He's living a quiet life as a bookseller. So they fly the now retired bookseller out to Lubang Island. He puts on his old military uniform one last time, and he goes into the jungle and finds his man. Think about that scene. The last time they saw each other, Onoda was 22. Now he's 52. His uniform is in rags, but his rifle is perfectly maintained. Major Taniguchi formally reads the order relieving him of duty. Onoda hears it, snaps to attention, gives a sharp salute, and surrenders his samurai sword. And just like that, his war was finally over.
You might think that's the end of the story, but in a way, his biggest challenge was just beginning. The Japan he came back to, it wasn't the Japan he left. The imperial empire he was willing to die for, gone, replaced by an economic superpower. The code of military honor, replaced by Western pop culture. He left a nation at total war and came back to a technological hub. He was celebrated as a hero, but he was a man completely out of his time.
He really struggled to fit in, so much so that he ended up moving to Brazil to start a new life as a cattle rancher. But years later, in 1996, he did go back to Lubang Island, and this time, he wasn't a soldier. He went to donate money to a local school, kind of a gesture of peace for everything that had happened. He ended up living a very long life, passing away in 2014 at the ripe old age of 91. Which really leaves us with a big question at the heart of his story. When you look at Hiro Onoda, what do you see? Is he the ultimate symbol of duty and loyalty, a soldier who was just unbreakable? Or is he a tragic victim of that same duty, a man whose life was spent fighting a ghost? It's a lot to think about.